Hey, hello everyone, and welcome to the UK Wildlife Podcast. I'm Victoria Hillman,
And I'm Neil Phillips.
and this week we've actually got something a little bit different. So we're actually going to go through some wildlife news, what we've been seeing as normal, and then we've got a really good interview a little bit later. So I think we'll kick off with should we kick off with the sightings so far, what we've been seeing this week? Because I think there's some interesting stuff, isn't there, Neil?
Yeah, I've had a couple of days out. I went to Lackford Lakes, Suffolk Wildlife Trust Reserve, in the middle of Suffolk roughly, and I went there to have a look at the infamous kingfishers, I suppose you could describe them as. And of course, I missed them by 10 minutes. And then when they came back, it perched on the other side of the bush where I couldn't get photos and blah, 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 the usual excuses. I didn't get any good pictures of them. I did see it catch a fish, which was nice, and glimpsed a water owl. So it wasn't, it's never a waste sitting in a nice hide like that. And me and my friend, Daniel Bridge, you can find him online, Daniel Bridge Photo Tuition, I think he is. Have a look for him. Good photographer, not good mate of mine. He came with me and we decided to head down to what's called the nuthatch stump because if you put a bit of seed down, a nuthatch comes down, and we got a few pictures there and some nice marsh tits. But the highlight for me of the day was the log next door to this stump, and there was three bank voles running around. And if you check my Twitter out, you can see a picture of one poking its head out between the
I,
logs as well.
I've seen that. It's actually a very cute picture. You need to
It
go and check
is.
it out.
You missed
It's
that. I
amazing.
don't do cute pictures, and I've done it again.
Yeah, you
But there we
have. It
go.
is a cute picture, Neil. You've done it.
Yeah,
It's a very
I've done it
cute
again.
picture. Yeah.
I've disgraced myself. But um, the highlight of the week, wildlife for me, the voles are good, was I was setting up my hide and I started feeling a bit warm. This was on Tuesday, I think, so it would have been the 21st, I believe. Thought I'd go and have a look at the lizard hibernaculum, optimistically thinking there might be one poking its head out or something. Couldn't see any. Was about to turn around and in the corner of my eye I could see a lizard basking right in the open on a log. So I've got some nice pictures. You can see one of them on my Twitter again. A lizard in January. That is the earliest I've ever had one. It's not unheard of, but they are cold tolerant species, obviously. The viviparous lizard, as we're meant to call them. A common lizard to most people. But yeah,
Yeah, it's still early though,
it
especially
is
given
early.
how cold it's been as well. I
Yeah,
mean,
it
I
was
don't know about
frost.
you, but certainly here, we've had what, 3 or 4 days of really cold weather.
It was a frosty morning, and there were still bits of frost in some of the shadows, but it was so warm in the sun, it decided to come out. So it must. I think it's hibernating under that pile of logs. So I was going to move some of them around, but I'm not going to touch them at all now. I wasn't going to touch the hibernaculum. This was the
Mm.
basking logs, but yeah, I'm going to leave them be. I'll just put some more in somewhere else rather than move those, I think. But yeah, I didn't expect to start my reptile photography
No,
so
not
soon.
not in mid-January.
No,
That is really early, actually.
yeah. I
That's
mean,
very
normally
early.
it's the common frogs you start your reptiles amphibian photography with, but not this year. Nice
No,
surprise, a
that's
nice surprise. Well, what about you? Have you seen anything?
I'm still not really out and about that much, but been keeping an eye on what's been going on in my garden. No sign of my frogs yet in the pond, I will say that. But we live quite high up on the hill, so it's the
Yeah.
pond's been had a layer of ice on it. But I have a cheeky magpie that has been burying numerous stuff in my garden. I haven't yet gone out to find out what it is that he's burying or she's burying. But yeah, there's probably been at least 2 or 3 times a day, about 3 or 4 days, they're burying stuff in my back garden in the lawn. So that could be interesting come later on in the year.
All sorts of plants
They could just
growing.
start, um, sprouting up everywhere. And actually saw our friendly neighborhood rat again
Oh,
for
lovely.
the first time. And I mean, she's in very good condition. I hadn't actually seen her since last year when we believe that she actually had young, and kind of know why she's visiting the area because a neighbor a few doors down they feed the birds, which is great, all for that. But they have a lot of feeders, and a lot of that food actually goes on the floor, and the rat's kind of making the most of that. So, I mean, she just uses our garden as quite literally as a rat run because she just comes through between the gardens. But she's there. We've got fields out the back of us, so I don't see that she's really causing any problems. Lots of little birds as well. There's a lot of blue tits and great tits actually over the last few days
Yeah,
in the garden, and
the
um,
feeder at yeah, for my feeder at work, I've been topping it up twice a day, full of small birds. Amazing.
what was really interesting is because we only have a little pond and the birds use it as a bird bath until the frogs spawn in it, and then it gets netted and they're not allowed to go anywhere near it because the frogs come first. But
Take that, birds.
it was really interesting just watching the birds almost wait and take their turn to actually have a bathe in it. So there would be one bird having a bathe, there'd be another one sitting on the pebbles around the outside of the pond, another one, and they would actually, it was like a queue. It was really, I sat there and watched it for about an hour. It was amazing. And it was like you wouldn't get two in the water at any one time, but they would actually just wait their turn, which I thought I've never seen that before.
Pecking order. Could be quite literally, isn't it?
Yeah, quite literally. I mean, the blackbirds got first dibs, and then we had robins.
Oh, that's good. So, moving on to podcast news. So, we're up to episode 6, which is pretty good. We're still going. We've had 1,306 downloads is the latest total, which is rather pleasing. So, thank you to everyone that's downloaded. In fact, the last episode has had over 300 downloads alone. So, that's pretty good.
I think that's absolutely amazing. You know, we've only, well, like I said, we've only done 6 episodes so far, and you know, it's still pretty new. So to have that many downloads is absolutely fantastic. I've actually got a little bit of news for you as well, Neil.
Yes.
We have 100 followers now on Twitter.
Hey.
It was 99 earlier today, and I nearly put something out said who's going to be our 100th follower, and somebody's done it. And we've got 242 on Facebook. So big thank you to everyone who's kind of interacting with us as well.
And please do share the podcast. I think a bit of words getting around. Words getting around. BBC Wildlife magazine. We have a little review in it. I haven't actually read it yet. I need to read it actually.
Would you like me to read it to you?
Oh, go on then. Should we read it out?
I'll read it. Hang on.
Let me guess. Neil is very annoying. Victoria is really good. She should find a better co-host.
Here we go. Yep. So, it's the UK Wildlife Podcast. In each episode of this new podcast, photographers Victoria Hillman and Neil Phillips discuss their sightings and latest wildlife news and examine a topic or two in detail, such as migratory animals and engaging adults with nature. Listening to them feels like being in a cafe, gossiping about wildlife with friends, along with the occasional tangents and rants that naturally come with such a chat. It's very easy to listen to, though occasionally complete beginners may struggle to follow when species names are shortened. So I think that's actually a really lovely review.
Yep. That's good.
So there we go. So thank you very much to BBC Wildlife magazine for.
We didn't even pay them for that. That's pretty good.
No. But a big thank you to them for popping that in.
Oh,
that's
yes,
really
definitely.
It was,
that was
great. So
excellent.
Yeah.
Oh, well, there you go. That's the podcast news. We're gonna keep the rest of it short because the interview is quite nice and long. We'll talk more about that in a second. We've got a couple of news stories we want to cover. This is the UK Wildlife News.
The question is, what are we going to start with? Do you want to go first with one of yours?
Yeah, I think we've got to start with the sea eagle. We've mentioned previously, I think it was possibly even the first episode, wasn't it? We mentioned the sea eagle release on the Isle of Wight, which is fabulous.
Oh, yeah, it could have been. Yeah, it could have been right back in that first episode.
I think it was 6 juveniles released. One, unfortunately, has gone missing, or was found dead, I think. One has turned up in Oxfordshire, where it is hanging out with the red kites. Now, if you've seen a red kite, you'll know they look quite big. They're all wing. There's not actually much to the body, but they look quite big when they're flying. They're bigger than a buzzard. But I can imagine a sea eagle must stand out with its 8-foot wingspan. And it's right next to the M40, apparently, where it is. But not many people have seen it. Someone made the point online. Can you imagine the poor bloke driving down the M40 looks up and goes, "I've just seen an eagle," and everyone just goes, "Yeah, right, whatever. They're just a buzzard." I wonder if anyone has actually done that.
I guess if they don't know it's there.
But apparently it's scavenging. It's learned from the red kite, so it thinks it's a big red kite from its behaviour.
Oh, wow.
Just imagine that. You're driving down a country lane. Oh, it's a red kite. Oh, my God, what this huge, great pterosaur-sized thing comes down. So should we move on to your story?
Yeah, well, if I do, obviously something that has been in the news a lot this week is about HS2 and the damage and destruction that it can, well, I would say potentially, but would cause to a lot of UK wildlife sites. And again, it's another story we're not going to cover in detail right now, but we thought we would just touch on it and just mention it. So I've just pulled out a couple of points from some of the reports I've read. And it's basically it's going to destroy or irreparably damage 5 internationally protected wildlife sites, 693 local sites, 108 ancient woodlands, and 33 legally protected sites of special scientific interest. So, there's just a bit of food for thought there. And on top of that, in some places, it will endanger wildlife such as willow-tit, white-clawed crayfish, and dinghy skipper butterfly, putting them at risk of local extinction.
Barnell Trust have objected to it as well, haven't they? And the Wildlife Trust.
Yeah. Really, I mean, when you look into it, it's something that I think needs to be stopped. But there's a lot of news out there, some of it truthful, some of it bending the truth as always. I mean, but there's a lot out there that you can read on it. So we said we would only just kind of mention it because it's probably one of our biggest wildlife stories this week.
And I think I'll end the news with a happier story. It starts rather sadly. There was 2 common dolphins seen off a nature reserve very close to me, one I know well, Thameside Nature Reserve, Wildlife Trust, which is just to the east of Tilbury. 2 common dolphins were seen stranded on the mud there, and the Thames, it's part of the Thames estuary, and there must be, it must go out half a mile at low tide, and these dolphins were stuck in the middle of it. A birder alerted, I believe he alerted District Wildlife Trust, who then contacted various people, and the British Divers Marine Life Rescue Group, who I believe are all volunteers, they went out there, met with the RNLI from Southend, who have a hovercraft, because down here, if you had a boat, it'd be completely useless if people get stuck in the mud. So they have a hovercraft rescue vehicle. I believe the fire brigade as well, all got together, worked out a plan, went out on the hovercraft. They assessed the dolphins. They obviously needed help because cetaceans aren't designed to support their body weight on land. They gave a quick assessment, worked out a plan, got them on some tarpaulins, got them on the hovercraft, and took them one at a time over to the water as the tide was coming in, because it was going to be a few hours and they might not have survived. Checked them over again, made sure they were okay and had recovered from the ordeal, and let them go, and they swam off seemingly healthy and happy. So, and nobody, haven't stranded again. That's always the danger of these things. So fingers crossed, just like Benny Beluga, who also turned up in the Thames a couple of years ago, another happy cetacean tale. Fingers crossed. We won't hear from them again, hopefully.
Yeah.
But because I believe they're quite oceanic common dolphins. So,
they are. Yeah, they wouldn't normally get them that close in.
No, which is so a bit of a happy story there, a happy ending. And I just want to quickly say hats off to the BDLMR, RNLI, and the fire service, of course, who are doing such a good job.
Yeah, it's great for everyone to work together to rescue those dolphins and get them back out. And we just got a couple of quick things, just touching on, again, we are probably going to cover this in a lot more detail in a few weeks when we talk about frogs and toads and have a special guest on at that point. But over the last week, certainly before we had the cold snap, the reports of toads emerging and starting their migrations are already coming in. There's already been reports from Hampshire, I believe, and a few other places where toads are already on the move, which is early. We wouldn't normally see them moving this early. And also, obviously a lot of reports and a lot of photographs coming in of snowdrops out. And I'm just going to mention this really quickly because I've actually spoken to quite a lot of people about it, and when they've asked questions. So a lot of the snowdrops are actually currently out and in full flower. I think, Neil, you've got some in full flower in your garden. They're actually cultivated snowdrops, so they're not wild snowdrops. So a lot of the ones we're seeing, they're in churchyards, they're in gardens, they've been planted, they're cultivated, and generally speaking, those snowdrops come out very much earlier than our wild ones. I mean, the ones, I've seen them out in gardens for probably about a couple of weeks now. The wild ones, and I've got a few patches around here where they are wild snowdrops. They still won't be out yet. They won't be out and flowering fully still for another few weeks. So yes, it's early to see some of these things come out, but you have to be aware that some of the ones that are coming out now, if they're cultivated, it doesn't really help us kind of gauge as much, how much things are changing in the wild. I mean, it's great to see them and it's lovely to see all the photos, but that's why we're seeing a lot of snowdrops at the moment. They are the cultivated ones, and they normally come out a good couple of weeks before the wild ones anyway.
Yeah, they've basically been cultivated to come out earlier, haven't they? So
yeah.
I'll quickly mention a couple of snowdrop facts that I know. Number one is they're not native to UK, or most people say they aren't. It's like a lot of these native things, it's a little bit of a debate there. And my favourite fact I found out recently is they can produce heat from the flower bud, so that's how they can grow through the snow. So if you get a layer of snow, they will melt their way through and then they flower above it, which I thought was a rather cool adaptation to flowering in winter, really, isn't it? So
That is, and not to forget the fact they actually have antifreeze proteins in them, so that they can actually, and that's why if you see snowdrops out and they're in full flower, and then you get, a covering of snow, they kind of all shrivel and they look like they're not going to survive. And once the snow's gone and sun comes out, it's like nothing happened.
yeah.
Absolutely amazing. And the name actually means, I think it's milk flower of the snow. It comes from the
Oh,
Greek.
I don't know the scientific name.
Galanthius nivalis, I
Oh,
think.
very good. I knew it was Galanthius, but I didn't know what the second bit was.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah, it's quite a lot of, actually, I put quite a lot of those facts in my book. That's
Oh,
why
of
I
course you did.
wondered
Yeah.
if you were just going to pull them out of the book.
I should have. It's upstairs, unfortunately, my copy. But yes, buy Victoria's book. Yes. Now on to the main event, which is our interview with Adrian Thomas from the RSPB. He very kindly come in his own time, gave us an interview. He'd been interviewed by the BBC and everybody, all the important people tomorrow. So I was very appreciative of him giving up his time. So he's worked for the RSPB for 20 years. He's been a champion of wildlife-friendly gardening. He's as you'll hear in the interview, it's an obsession of his. He's also written some books on wildlife gardening, on birdsong, and he works as sort of a project leader at the RSPB on quite a variety of projects, which we'll cover in the interview. But the main reason to get him on was for the Big Garden Birdwatch, which takes place this weekend. So here is Adrian. Unfortunately, due to technical problems, Victoria couldn't join us in the interview, but enjoy. Hello, Adrian. Thanks for joining us today.
Pleasure, Neil. Good to speak to you.
Now, Adrian is here today. He works for the RSPB and he's here to talk to us mainly about the Big Garden Birdwatch, which will be taking place this weekend.
You're right, it's this weekend as I quickly flick up to see the dates. 25th to 27th. It used to always be a Saturday and Sunday, and now it's Saturday, Sunday or Monday that you can choose.
Oh, that's brilliant. Oh, that extra day. That's quite handy for some of us, people that work at weekends and stuff.
Yeah, indeed, yeah.
Oh, well, can you explain what it is?
Well, put simply, it is the largest bird survey in the world. I think that most people who've got any interest in birds will have heard of it because it gets across the news every year, which is really brilliant because it brings nature to the forefront. It's been running since 1979. It started as a kids survey with Blue Peter and the RSPB joining forces to do it. And then it just grew and grew to the point where over the past few years, around about 500,000 people take part each year. They just take 1 hour out of their weekend to sit with a nice cup of tea, looking out the window and count the maximum number of each species of bird that they see during that hour. That's the critical thing, that they don't do a cumulative count, but they count the maximum that they see at any one point during that hour. And what that then does is it gives us this instant snapshot, really, of how well our garden birds are faring. And because there are so many people taking part, then it really is effective because we can see it at a national level, we can see it at a county level, and even see it at a city level. Some of the cities pull out their own results to find out how cities are doing. And it's the survey that, for instance, was one of the first things to spot the decline in the song thrush. And we've been able to spot the ongoing decline of starling, but things like goldfinches coming up in numbers. So what a wonderful way of engaging a lot of people, getting them into wildlife for the first time, and in doing so, producing some really valuable science.
Yeah, it's a win-win-win, basically, isn't it? I've been a bit fan of the Birdwatch. I do it most years. I'm hoping to do it with my little girl for the first time. She's nearly 4, so whether I get to sit there the whole hour, I doubt, but I might get there for some of it. I do have fond memories as a kid seeing a tree creeper in my great aunt's garden, which was for the first time, I believe, which was a rather nice tick to get.
Oh, fabulous. And that's it. It's a formative thing for many people, isn't it? And I do speak to like some serious birds who go, well, it's not your proper science, is it? But it's a way in for so many people. And I urge even serious birders to do it just so that it enthuses and inspires other people to do likewise.
Yeah, grab the kids, grab the grandkids, or even if they're grown kids, grab them, get them to sit down for an hour. It's nice, relaxing thing to do. So, if people want to join in, if you're doing it next year, we're doing this podcast a bit late for this. I know you can get packs with the post, but can they still join in? Okay, if they haven't got a pack.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, most people these days submit their results online, and that allows us to turn around the results really quickly. But if people have still want to do it by post, then we can still receive those results that way. But it's really easy to put all your results down the moment you've finished your hour.
How do they sign up for this?
Well,
What's the best way?
in a way, it's not really a sign up thing.
Yeah.
It's there at rspb.org.uk/birdwatch. And that's the place that you need to go. You can find all the instructions. Anybody who's a little bit unsure about some of the birds that they're seeing, well, there's some helpful guides on there as well. All the instructions about how to take part in, but it's so simple that hopefully most folk won't need that. Little stories about what's taking place, and obviously on social media there's a lot of stories that pour in over the weekend of things that people have seen, and sometimes they see really unusual stuff. You know, if it's a waxwing year, then we find out about waxwings that probably haven't been found by anybody else.
Oh wow. And, I remember a few years ago people getting excited about getting red kites, but I imagine people in Oxfordshire in certain areas it's probably a daily occurrence, isn't it now?
It is, and it's a really good point you raising that, actually, because one of the key things is that what we want are birds that actually land in people's gardens, not the accidental flyovers. Now, there are some people for whom a red kite will dip down onto the lawn and pick up some scraps, but if it's just like some gulls flying over, well, they're going somewhere else. They're not to do with your garden. So it's the land-ins that we want.
Yeah, only if they touch down.
Yeah.
There's a related program, but is it the School Watch or something? They get school groups to do similar thing?
Yeah, absolutely. The Big Schools Birdwatch, and there's a much longer time period for them to do that over, and the results are collated separately from the Big Garden Birdwatch, and quite rightly so, because what you find in the Big Schools Birdwatch is there are a lot of black-headed gulls and pied wagtails, much higher up the charts.
Yeah, I can imagine that. Perfect habitat for wagtails, a nice big concrete playground.
Yeah, and all the crisps that have been dropped during break time.
Some people online will have probably seen that we had some technical problems when we attempted this on Tuesday. But you told me that on that night you were about to go and see some, shall we say, a group of very important people and show them around St James's Park for a bird watch. Do you want to tell us about that?
Yeah, that was really good fun. It was a group of we sent out the invitation to all MPs to see if they wanted to come along. I'm really pleased with the turnout. I think it was over a dozen MPs came for an early morning, 8:30, walk around St James's Park, because one of the reasons for doing it in a park was that we recognise that there are some people who don't have a garden, but we still want them to be able to take part in the Big Garden Birdwatch. So we offer it for folk to go into their local green space and count the birds that you see. Now, the MPs were really interested about all the ducks and swans and gulls that are on the water, but we were focusing on looking for the smaller birds, the garden birds that are around St James's Park, and it was really quite telling. It was lovely to see their level of interest. It was MPs from all political parties who came along and really had a good old chat about wildlife, the problems that it faces, and with things such as the Environment Bill and all of the issue to do with climate change, all hot on the agenda, then it was a chance to talk about all of those things as well. We saw some really interesting stuff. So there were long-tailed tits out there in St James's Park.
Nice.
But it's the things that weren't there that I think are most telling, and to be able to explain to the MPs that as a very small child I was taken to St James's Park. It was my only trip to London because I never left Worcestershire. And the only thing I can remember, two things. One was the train, that was exciting. And the second thing was in St James's Park, you held out your arms and sparrows lined up from fingertip to fingertip across your arms. And that was such a formative memory for me. Do that in St James's Park today, and of course, not a single sparrow to be seen. No sparrows in the park, didn't see any starlings in the park, and it's those missing birds, isn't it? And it's that risk of this shifting baseline that I remember those house sparrows, but people going to St James's Park these days will remember probably the parakeets, but won't realise that the park used to be awash with house sparrows. They used to breed in the iron gates of Buckingham Palace. It's astonishing to think what's happened in a generation.
It is. The sparrows have disappeared from my hometown, and I read the blog of Tony Duckett, who is one of the Royal Park's wildlife rangers. He was Regent's Park at one point, and he said on his blog one year he had more hoopoes in Regent's Park than he had house sparrow records, not including London Zoo, where there's obviously the only surviving colony, not captive of course, they're actually wild in the zoo. I think that's what he said. He when he finally saw one, it's the first one, I can't remember if it was his garden or Regent's Park. This is a man that spends all his time in London birding basically and working around the wildlife, and he's first sparrow saw for 2 years outside London Zoo grounds. And the ones that end up in Regent's Park are just wandered out. I suppose if you hold arms out in park now, you're more likely to get a parakeet landing it, aren't you?
I did.
Oh, you did?
I did this week. Yeah. But this is where the Big Garden Birdwatch, I know we've got the fabulous stuff that comes through from the breeding bird survey from the BTO, but here we've got this midwinter snapshot, and this little signal that house sparrows might be turning the corner. So those in Wales, those in Scotland, those in Northern Ireland, really strong upturn. It's not that they're back up to the original levels, but the graph isn't pointing downwards anymore. And I should be really fascinated come April when the Big Garden Birdwatch results come out to see how well house sparrows are doing. I think we may see more of an uplift. That's my crystal ball prediction. The things I'm worried about, a chaffinch,
yes,
that really does seem on the slide. It seems to be following in the footsteps of greenfinch. And I am intrigued about what's happening with collar dove. And I have a suspicion that collar dove may be down again in this year's Big Garden Birdwatch.
That's interesting.
Wood pigeon may be on the rise. Is that what the problem is with collar dove, or is it a disease issue again? But
it's funny. I was just thinking to myself, I've seen more wood pigeons than collar doves recently. Although I'm spending a bit more time in more rural areas where there are obviously the wood pigeons there's huge flocks of them in the fields. I mean, I seem to remember reading that birds that have learned to use feeders recently. So the goldfinch was the classic one, but more recently the long-tailed tit. Is that correct? That's
yeah,
isn't it? Yeah. They learned to use fat balls. Because I remember the thing that was, I'd never go on feeders, and even the ones in my garden until this winter never went on the feeders, and I've seen them on the fat balls and the peanuts recently. They just seem to be all changing their habits, but you can see why the pressure on them to eat bird food when there's a lack of natural food must be quite high.
And of course, the really intriguing one is the blackcap. Wintering in the UK, starting to use fat feeders, which for an insect eater was like really curious. And now there's been this research that blackcaps that winter in the UK have evolved to have longer bills than the spring migrant blackcaps that we see. And it's thought to be because of the use of bird feeders. Evolution in our time.
I had seen there's a paper, haven't they done it with I believe great tits and a couple other species they've shown have got longer beaks now to get into the peanuts in the feeders.
Yeah, imagine what it's going to be like in 200 years' time. We're going to have these kind of curlew-billed small birds in our garden.
That'd be pretty cool. Although unfortunately we might not have any curlews by that point as well.
Yeah.
Rather depressing spin on that. All right. Well, talking of bird feeders and things like that, I believe did you write a book on gardening for wildlife?
I did indeed, yeah. My day job with the RSPB is really, really varied, and I do all sorts of things, setting up new nature reserves and running campaigns to try and save things like the nightingale. But my passion outside of work has for a long time been what can you do in your back garden to make it fit for wildlife? And it's turned into, let's call it an obsession. Why not? I spend a lot of time writing about it, giving talks about it. More than anything, I love to get out there and do it and experiment in my garden as to what can I do that makes it better for wildlife. So yeah, it's a real passion.
I'm going to nip in first and suggest that a pond is the best thing you can do. But could you give any quick tips of what people could do? What the best things are?
A pond would be right up there in my top 3, and it would depend on which day I got up as to whether it be number 1 or 2 or 3. Plants is right up there. Filling a garden with plants, whether that be trees, bushes, shrubs, flowers. It's just because it's the bedrock of so much of life. Because when you've got a pond as well, an empty pond is nothing compared to a pond that's got plants in it. Which is beautiful for many people who like gardening, because it's kind of permission to grow as much as you want. And you only have to think about how many front gardens have been paved over these days. That trend for decking that came through about 20 years ago and seemed to persist. All of that ate into so much wildlife habitat. And when you look at how many gardens there are out there, well, the RSPB has got round about 140,000 hectares of nature reserve in the UK, and we've been collecting those for like 80 years or so. The area of gardens compared to that 140,000 hectares is thought to be around about 490,000 hectares. So it's over 3.5 times the area of RSPB nature reserves. Now, gardens aren't going to have bitterns and skylarks and things like that, but what gardens do have, there's been this real shift in understanding from maybe 50 years ago. There's a famous quote from an ecologist who said that gardens for wildlife are effectively a desert. And that was because nobody had looked in gardens to find out what was there. And there was this seminal study done by an amazing woman called Jennifer Owen in Leicestershire. She just had a kind of bog standard suburban garden, got a bit of a veg patch, bit of a flower patch, bit of a lawn, but it's just your average sized garden. And in it, she found over 2,600 different species of wildlife. And intriguingly, I think it was 4 of them were new to the UK. One of them was new to science. Unbelievable.
I think it was QI. They put the old, where's the most new species found? And everyone was saying the rainforest or the oceans. And it is people's backyards, because the experts go out there, look in their own yard and go, that's new. I can't identify that. And then that's how they get them, I believe. I think the top square for spiders in the UK is one of the local county recorders in his garden.
Yeah, I can well imagine.
Yeah. It is remarkable. It's amazing what you can get in your garden. The highlights for me is probably I had a wall brown butterfly, which in the southeast has declined massively, and there's a little colony. Well, I say little colony in my area of South Essex, around sort of Tilbury up to Basildon, Canvey area, and they like brownfield sites, and so gardens are sort of a brownfield site in a way, I suppose. And yeah, I couldn't believe it when I had one sitting in my garden. But you can get sparrowhawks, and you start getting down to invertebrates, and there's all sorts of wonders to be had in your garden.
Yeah. I'm not trying to trump you here whatsoever, but last year I put in the start of what I call my scree garden and was able to plant some kidney vetch into it. And I couldn't believe it. I had egg-laying small blue butterfly on the kidney vetch. Now, I'd put it in, I'd put the kidney vetch in with this kind of like, this is for the small blues. Yeah. But of course, never really believing it, because the closest colony to me is probably at least 2 miles away. And yet year 1 of growing kidney vetch, and I had small blue in it. And that's really inspired me to expand that area of kidney vetch. If I can have a self-sustaining population of small blue butterflies, one of our rarer butterfly species in the garden, that would be so amazing. But
I wonder how many people have got them in their garden. Probably. Well, you never know. There's lots of people that don't look very hard in their garden, might have some incredibly rare things, and people haven't looked. I've got a snail, some non-native thing that's only been found on 4 sites in Essex, which was quite nice. But again, probably because nobody's looked for them. They're probably in loads of gardens. Probably whatever garden centre the previous owners bought a plant from, everyone else that's bought one from there has probably got them as well. Digging a pond, I find, is best thing. I'm obviously biased because I love dragonflies, frogs and amphibians generally, and pond creatures generally. Think of the hours I spent as a kid looking in a pond. It's just so relaxing. If you just get a bit of wildlife flying around your garden, you can sit there, have a drink in your hand, a nice warm day. It just sells it to me. Even if you're not into wildlife, it is quite relaxing. You have your own little oasis. Leave a corner unkept is the other thing I've been hearing recently. In fact, I believe there's a campaign to not mow your lawn at all, which I'm all for.
There is, yeah. I'm really big into turning your lawn into a meadow. If you went back like 15, 20 years when I really started getting into this, it was kind of seen as the holy grail of turning your lawn into a meadow, but a holy grail in terms of the fact that if you try it, it's really difficult and you probably won't be successful. And I like to think that times are changing. It's a case of, it doesn't matter if you don't produce the most perfect hay meadow that's ever been in your back garden. It doesn't matter if you don't have orchids coming up in it, but just by either just leaving the mower in the shed for a while and letting the lawn do its thing. It's amazing what has been waiting there to flower, and you've been chopping the tops off all of these years. But then with just a little bit of scarifying, throwing some yellow rattle seed on in the autumn that then comes up and sucks out some of the energy out of the grasses and allows the other flowers to flourish. Well, I'm trying it on a patch of lawn straight outside my back door. It's kind of like your postage stamp bit of lawn that many people have in their garden. I'm really, really fortunate. I've got an acre of garden, but it means I can do these little tests in little parts of the garden. And so I actually laid commercial turf to then see how long it would take me to turn completely ryegrass dominated commercial turf into a meadow. So I'm in year 2 now. I've got my yellow rattle down. Last year, I had things like birdsfoot trefoil come up,
Nice.
cowslip come up. I had the first grasshoppers come in there. I had small skipper in there, in something that is only 1 year on from being fresh turf laid off the roll.
But one thing I did find, and someone suggested, for people, if you've got to sell it to, say, your other half or someone else that co-owns a lawn, they said completely take out the turf and sow it as a meadow. So put a bit of cornflour mix down for the first year, and then have, and make sure you avoid whatever mix suits your soil type, if it's clay or sandy. And that actually worked quite well. I had quite a nice little patch of flowers for a while, and everyone likes poppies, so get some poppies in there, and it intends to sell it to people. I don't know if you found similar or.
I do. I think the only problem is that people love that first year when the cornfield annuals come through. So you get the corn cockle and the, as you say, the corn poppy, the common poppy, so you get yellows and whites and reds and blues in there. And then the next year, because those are just annuals, and if you want to perpetuate those annuals, you have to cultivate the soil again and re-sow again. Whereas if you're looking for a true meadow, because meadow comes from the word meaning to mow, it is a hay meadow. It's something that is managed by cutting. Then it loses some of that colour. And there was a lovely old guy called John Gould that I went to see, who had adopted his local verge down in Dorset, and in year one he sowed his true wildflower meadow mix with the grasses in there, but in amongst the seed mix was all the poppies. And so year one, the people of the village loved it because it was this mass of red, and year two they were going, what's gone wrong, and of course nothing had gone wrong. And of course by year two, year three, as the grasses came through and the perennials came through, it actually became better for wildlife, because you suddenly got the common blue butterflies and the marbled white butterflies breeding in a true meadow. But John, to his absolute credit, he got his notice boards up, his little handwritten notice boards, to explain to folk what he'd done. And wouldn't it be fab if, like, everybody did either something in their back garden or adopt a little local patch and just did something. It doesn't have to be perfect. You just have to put a little bit of knowledge in. You know, if you want common blue butterflies, you need to know that you need to put birdsfoot trefoil in. And I do think, that 16 million gardens out there, well, 8 million of them surely could put a little bit of birdsfoot trefoil in their front lawn or their back lawn, and we could have common blues everywhere.
Even if it's a couple of square metres in every garden, it'd make such a difference. It really would. I
tell you what my dad had to do, because he'd been brought up with, like, Victorian style bedding and square edges and everything. In order to accept letting the lawn grow long, he had to mow straight edges.
I was going to mention that.
Patch.
Something my dad always taught me. I used to help him do some gardening occasionally, and he used to do the odd gardening job. Was, as long as you put a straight edge, it looks neat. And even if the grass is overgrowing and all that kind of stuff, it still looks neat. Weirdly, it's weird. It's just the way the human brain works. I've always said that with these grass verges, if they just mowed the edges, either side the path for a foot or two, most people will be happy.
Yeah.
There's just so many little bits we could do here and there. I think it just help immensely. But like I say, it's important to have the grass in with the wildflowers. There was that when last year it sort of became fashionable, didn't it, for some of the councils to put in wildflower mixes, and they'd use non-native cornfield mix like we're talking about. But there'd be no grasses in there, so the adult bees the bees would be happy, and the adult butterflies were happy. That they wouldn't be able to breed because there's no food plant for them, like the trefoil and the grasses in many cases. Is it marble whites and the skippers? I believe the caterpillars eat the grass from memory.
And the browns, the meadow browns, gatekeepers, and your wall brown.
Wall brown, yeah, and burnet moth, I believe, as well. The day flying.
Birdsfoot trefoil for them.
So is it birdsfoot trefoil for them as well? Oh, right.
Put that in for your common blue, and you'll get your burnet moths as well.
I do like a burnet moth.
Yeah,
and that we could go off and tangent a little bit more with the pulling of ragwort, which is necessary in some places, but when they're doing it mild in agriculture, it just winds me up something chronic. Especially if you leave it long enough and get a big enough population of cinnabar, it gets pretty much wiped out anyway because the caterpillars eat it all. But,
they do love a munch on that. They're pretty robust, aren't they, to go munching through something that has got toxins within it.
Cyanide, I believe, isn't it?
Is it indeed?
Yeah.
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah, that yellow and black coloration. That's why I don't eat them.
Yeah.
Generally good idea. Moving on. Well, I think we'll talk a bit about your work maybe a bit later. You've done another book on bird song. Would you you can mention that as well? That'd be quite good.
Thank you very much. Yeah. The RSPB Guide to Birdsong came out last April, and I would say that that is my other outside of work passion. I think it comes from the fact that my dad was the volunteer warden of a nature reserve in Worcestershire that had nightingales when I was a little boy. They'd gone by the time I'd kind of reached secondary school. But so I remember folk gathering in the kind of dusk in May at the nature reserve and listening in kind of reverential silence to these birds, and no wonder, because they really are incredible. So I've had my life, all of my kind of birding and nature life has been surrounded by birdsong, and I have been fascinated by it. I seem to really get something from. There's something about the sense of place that you get from it. The sense of season, the sound of the first field fares of the autumn, or the sound of the first chiff-chaff of spring. And play me a cuckoo, and I go delirious over it. So I wanted to. There've been products out there in the past, and some really brilliant ones. But I wanted to get out and record birdsong, and then put it into a format in a book and a CD that worked in the kind of way that you might get a foreign language tape. So the book and the CD, or the book and the digital download, kind of work together, and you go through maybe a couple of speeches at a time. I tell you a bit on the CD about what you're listening for. It kind of corresponds with the book, where you get a bit more information. Then you get to test yourself before you move on to the next species. And the other thing I wanted to do was give people a bit more vocabulary to use when describing birdsong, because if you ask someone to describe a bird visually, they'll often be able to tell you a lot about the colour and the shape and the size and all of those kind of things. But ask people to describe birdsong, and they often flounder for the words to describe it. Whereas actually, if you break birdsong down into how long did the sound last? Did the pitch go up or down? Was there a pattern that you could pick out from the notes? All of those kind of things. I've got 7 key attributes that you can listen for, and you don't have to listen for all 7 in every sound. There are some birds where it's the volume that's really critical, or it is the timbre of the sound, that kind of tonal colour of the sound that's important. So that's what I wanted to try and convey. I've included loads of sonograms in there, but I hand drew them all to kind of pick out the really salient features, because anybody who's visual, sonograms, if you look at a sonogram of a reed warbler versus a sedge warbler, you can instantly see there is an incredible difference between them. And yet so often, without that to help you, people get stuck between the two.
Yeah, I have to admit, certainly at the start of every season, I have to really think what the difference is. And when you've got the two close together, which sometimes you can tell a difference, but if you've got one in isolation, it can throw you. And it doesn't help that the reed warblers don't always stick to the reeds, and the sedge warblers don't always stick to the bushes like they're meant to either. But
yeah.
I mean, I've always liked the birdsong. People go, I don't know how you do it, to me. And I'm not that good. I'm not sort of pro level, but I've for years, and it's this sort of almost attrition with it, isn't there? You start learning certain ones, and that eliminates them, so you can learn the others. But there's all the tricks, and there's the Yellowhammer is it a little bread and a bit of cheese, a little bread and a bit of cheese. This is a good one, and the one I'll never forget. I'll have to make it child friendly, from what my friend said, was the willow warbler, which was sing 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 sing. Oh, sod it. He said it's slightly ruder than that, but yeah, because it sort of sing 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 sing, and then it sort of starts to give up, and oh, sod it, basically, isn't it? It's I didn't do a very good version of that. I might edit that out. Yeah, and the United one, is it Collared Dove is United?
Indeed.
United.
Yeah. So I've tried in the book to come up with some new ones of those as well, and certainly for some birds, having those kind of mnemonics really helps. So I'm personally quite fond of the Chetty's warbler, which almost always the male will sing chip shop, chippy chip shop, chippy chip shop.
Oh, that's good. I like that one. Yeah, and usually cause, like, you go deaf temporarily in whatever ear's closest to the bush it's singing in as well.
Indeed,
they're so loud. It's between them and the wren, which is the most impossibly loud, I believe. I remember the first time I saw a wren in the open singing, I was looking directly at the wren, and my brain was going, now what bird's singing? Because that's far too small, and my brain couldn't comprehend this tiny little bird was making such a loud noise. But having worked with children for a while now, I probably could have done it. But yes.
And I think the thing with birdsong and bird sounds is that if you make the effort to master it, I think you see double what you do if you
Agreed.
haven't, and you see it earlier, and you pick out the stuff that's overhead, and you don't get lost in woodland and in terms of like what is around me. And I just think it opens up both an insight into the birds, but it also opens up that emotional connection with them. And I look at how many people these days spend their life outdoors with their earphones in, and I think what joy they're missing.
Yeah, I never. When people go for a walk in a nature reserve with their earphones in, I'll never understand that. Really, I know they're probably trying to focus and hit their pace or whatever, but
Indeed, and it was for the reason that birdsong seems to tap something deep in our psyche that we decided to use it. The RSPB decided to use it last spring to see if we could get birdsong into the British pop charts. I don't know if you saw that happen.
Which is a wonderful way of changing the subject into my next question, which was, could you tell us about the Let Nature Sing single?
Oh, you do know about it. Fantastic. Yes. Yeah.
I believe I actually bought a copy. I can't remember now. I think I did.
If you did, you were part of the movement that jettisoned us up to number 18 in the pop charts. And I think there can have been very few, I'm going to call it a pop single, that have been played on radios 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6.
Oh yeah.
It was to hear it played on the Radio 1 chart show, introduced as "This is Let Nature Sing" from the RSPB, which is drawing attention to the fact that we've lost 40 million birds from the British landscape in the last 50 years. That was what they said on the chart show, and that's what it was there to do, really, which was to draw attention to the nature's crisis effectively, but to as wide an audience as possible, because so many of us know all about this, and yet there is this vast body of the public that have been oblivious to it and cutting through to the point where they go, oh, that's a problem. That now we recognize what all the conservationists are going on about. Using birdsong to do that, and I was really privileged to be asked to lead on pulling that together. I work with Sam Lee, who's the folk singer who does all the amazing singing with Nightingale stuff. Amazing guy, and together we pulled together the single, and it shot there up into the charts. And I just want to do an album. That's all I want to do.
Oh, that'd be good. They're good. I mean, some people. You've explained it why that sort of thing's important. I mean, sometimes you get some of the hardcore birders sort of going, "Oh, why are they doing this sort of thing?" But that's the whole point. We can't save everything unless we've got at least most people on board. But really, you want everyone on board at least partly, and then politicians and such. Again, the walk for the MPs will tell this. Politicians and such, we need to get them on board. If you get the people behind something, the MPs can't ignore it. If they want to get re-elected, they're going to have to listen, basically. You've worked on quite a lot of projects. Would you like to tell us about some more of those as well?
Yeah. So interesting, a little segue there that just sprung to mind. I'm currently working, and I never thought I'd say this, with Barratt, the house builders. Barratt agreed to try and set a new standard for wildlife-friendly housing on one of their developments. And it's a development called Kingsbrook. It's just southeast of Aylesbury in Buckinghamshire. Barratt, to their absolute credit, chose their largest development in the whole of the UK to do it on. 2,450 homes it'll be when the thing is complete, and that takes in the order of 8 to 10 years to complete a development that big. And I'm so proud of what they're incorporating into it. You've got things such as Swift bricks and bat bricks and house martin cups, the kind of stuff that you'd expect. But Swift bricks are normally really expensive on the market. So Barratt actually ploughed £30,000 in to develop a new, cheaper Swift brick.
That's good.
And it means that this development is going to have 800 Swift bricks in it. And it's kind of like, it's just the start. There's hedgehog highways, there are wildflower verges, there are these sustainable drainage systems where water that pools off the houses then percolates into free draining tarmac, effectively. It's the water goes through the tarmac
stuff, yeah.
and then into these kind of new lakes and pools that are built around the outside. Construction only started in 2016 summer, so we're only 3.5 years into construction, but already I mean, there's 500 houses that are occupied already, and these folk have got pools and parks going in all around them, which have already got kingfishers and little egrets, and it really is fantastic what's going on there. Now, what I can't claim is that what's happening at Kingsbrook isn't happening anywhere else. It is. There's nothing absolutely new happening at Kingsbrook, but I've never seen everything done in one place, and I've never seen this all done on such a scale, and that's what makes Kingsbrook a trendsetter. So it was really Kingsbrook was a case study in the government's 25-year environment plan that came out a couple of years ago and is now really going to get translated, hopefully, into a brilliant environment bill. So it's great to see Kingsbrook used in there to tell a story. And in the National Planning Policy Framework, which is what planners have to use to guide new developments when they happen, things such as swift bricks and hedgehog highways are now in there as of the last 3 months. So it's beginning to make a change. And of course, what's happening is that people are going to Kingsbrook, potential customers, and they're going, hold on a minute, I've got like all of this green space around me and all of these trees and hedges going in. And so sales are going wonderfully of Kingsbrook, which I accept is part and parcel of the thing, really, isn't it?
Unfortunately, we have to accept that there's going to be houses built, so you kind of have to, it's kind of a make the best of it kind of situation, and things like that are going to help. And there is that stat. It's funny you should say that people were saying gardens were wildlife deserts years ago. I believe it's more than one study now has shown that the average piece of farmland, let's not slag it off unnecessarily, the average piece of farmland has less species than a garden, and that's not including the plants. A big monocultural field which might be built on, yes, okay, it supplies with food and everything else, but we'll skip past that for a minute. From a purely wildlife perspective, and I've spoken to ecologists that have said this, we don't like to admit it, but building on something can actually make it better for wildlife. Obviously not the big stuff, but for the smaller stuff, which, you know, is just as important in my book, it can be better. Emphasis on the can there, because of course if they put one of those great big deckings down, it's not going to be very good, is it?
And of course now there's the concept of net gain, which is gaining great credibility. So the idea that when housing goes in the future, there'll be a requirement that more nature is there as the builders leave than there was when they came in. So there's definite signs in the right direction. I saw that another of the housing companies, I think it was Bovis, is doing hedgehog highways now. I'd love them to do all the things that Barratt is doing. So I'm more than happy to do a big thumbs up to Barratt and any other developer who is trying their best to incorporate this stuff. And of course, they are going to respond very much to the demands of the consumer, saying that we want that stuff. So I feel that these things work the best when the business, the politicians, and the public all push in the same direction. We've all got a part to play in it.
Well, they're just one thing that's given me heart of all the doom and gloom that's been going on recently in various conservation things and global warming and climate change is there's lots of small things don't necessarily make up for it, but there's a bit of hope. For example, there was I can't remember the name of them, one of the main fence manufacturers. One of the biggest problems with hedgehogs, of course, is getting from between gardens, like you say, with the hedgehog highways. But the modern design fences had that concrete block at the bottom, as opposed to just the wood, where the hedgehogs used to be able to dig under it. They actually make a concrete block with a hedgehog-sized hole in it, and they sell it at the same price as the normal ones. They said, look, we don't want people not buying it because it's more expensive, so everyone just has to put one of those in. And I thought that was a really nice sort of gesture. Just simple things like that will make a difference at the end of the day. Yeah, we just need to push people and just make people aware that we want these things, I think, is the way forward.
And I love so Barratt, for example, I set them the challenge of doing the hedgehog highways, but I didn't know how they'd prefer to do it. So they came up with a solution themselves, which was, you know, the little drill bits, circular drill bits that you like make a hole in a nest box for the nesting hole. Well, it turns out that Barratt's got one that's about 12 centimeters wide. So they just ram that through the bottom of the fence. Lovely. It's easy. It's like 10 seconds and the hole is made.
Yeah, so you've worked on projects with nature reserves as well, I believe?
Yeah, I have. Yeah, as you can tell, I'm incredibly lucky at the variety of stuff that I get to do. Probably the biggest project was working with the Environment Agency when they realigned the coast on the south coast, West Sussex, south of Chichester, a place called Medmerry, which came to prominence in the birding world because the very first year after the hole had been cut in the original seawall to allow the seawater to flow into effectively a big new bay, 380 hectares of new bay created, and blackwing stilts came and nested on the little flood alleviation pool on the landward side of the bank. That the EA had been brilliant enough to like take our design for how we wanted that pool to be created with lots of little islands and things in it, and straight in came the stilts and avocets, and spoonbill is regular on it, doesn't breed but is regular on that as well. But you've got this huge area of intertidal habitat that's being created. My job was to work with the agency to design the habitats, and in particular to work with the local community, because this idea, it used to be called managed retreat, and what a terrible terrible term for it,
defeatist, isn't it?
Yeah, when what this was doing was creating fabulous new habitat. It was removing a system that was just unsustainable. The existing sea bank was shingle, and the high tides just bashed into them and would overtop, threatening 360 houses with flooding. Whereas the new bank that's it's inland. There's miles of new footpath, new cycle path, new horse riding routes around it. You've got all of this wonderful intertidal habitat. In fact, Medmerry not only came to prominence, it breached in 2013, so it's 6.5 years now since it breached, and we got the stilts in year one, but we also got an invasion of sharks into the new bay. They were the spotted. Oh, I'm going to forget the name now.
Is it the smooth hound?
That's right. Yeah.
That's one of the rarer species, isn't it? I believe.
And it was over 100 of these in a shoal, all their fins breaking the surface. And what is thought
was there a viral video of that at one point?
There was.
Yes, I remember that. Yeah. That was cool. I nearly went down to see that.
Yeah. It was. I got to see some of them doing their stuff. When I first saw it and saw the sharks thrashing around in the shallows, I thought, is there a beached porpoise in there or something? There was a little bit of nervousness locally about, should we really be known for being the bay that's got sharks in it? But once I learned that the smooth hound, its alternative name is the gummy shark, that really soothed people's fears. Yeah. A shark that's called the gummy shark doesn't strike fear into you.
No, because these bays, I know they've done some similar stuff along the Essex coast. I believe the Wildlife Trust did one at Abbots Hall Farm, and I think they've done something similar at Finger and Hoe as well. And they're just amazing fish nurseries. And it's like you're saying, it's amazing how quickly they go, right, we'll just revert to salt marsh, or the plants start to colonise. And then if you get a tidal surge, it's got to cross all that salt marsh plants and go up all those channels. And by the time it hits the wall, it's lost most of its energy. So it's amazing flood defence as well.
Yeah.
It's just, and the sea level is rising, so we have to make space when we've got these floods for the water somewhere to go. There's just almost a no-brainer. There's all these things we've been doing in the past to try and fight nature. If you work with it, it's a lot easier.
Yeah.
It's a lot safer for everyone.
You get win-wins all over the place. And one of the intriguing things with Medmerry is that during its creation, before the breach was made in the seawall, a lot of archaeology was uncovered on what had been only a year before, 2 years before, ploughed fields of oilseed rape. Suddenly this archaeology was uncovered, and right in the path of where the breach was made and where the sea came in was a medieval fish weir, showing that this had been intertidal like 400 years ago, and they'd been using it to catch fish and presumably transport it up to Chichester, which would have been the big base there. So it was like... Well, I know that some people don't like the idea of turning back the clocks, but if turning back the clock means we go back to a more sustainable system, then it makes absolute sense in my book.
Agreed. Right, well, Adrian, we've been talking for nearly 50 minutes, so I think we'll probably finish up there. But
Yeah.
we've covered a nice broad range of topic, bit of an insight for people of some of the work the RSPB do. So just to reiterate for people, if they want to do the Big Garden Birdwatch this weekend, where would they go?
RSPB website, rspb.org.uk/birdwatch. Nice and simple.
Brilliant. And would you like to give titles of your books that you brought out so people can find them?
Yeah, I'd love to. RSPB Gardening for Wildlife, and that's now in its second edition. Make sure you get the second edition because it's got 60 more pages. And the new one out is RSPB Guide to Birdsong, which you can get. It comes with a CD, but you can also get a free digital download of all the CD contents, and you get to hear my voice on it.
And do you have a Twitter account or a Facebook page or anything you'd like to promote at all, or a website of your own?
I'd love to, but I don't seem to have time for them.
Oh, there we go. So we can't follow you on Twitter or anything. That sounds like it'd be quite amazing. But maybe it's something to consider if you it's only 100 and something characters every so often on the train, maybe. But sounds like you have quite an interesting career. So, well,
any following of me you have to do physically, I'm afraid.
Oh, right. So you telling people to stalk you? Okay. Oh, brilliant. Right. Well, hopefully, Adrian, we'll meet in person at some point at Bird Fair or somewhere. Or I'll try and make a point of doing that. But all I can say is thank you so much for joining us. Our first guest on the podcast. Hopefully, the first of many. And I think we made a good choice for the first one.
Pleasure. Thank you so much, mate.
Cheers. Thank you very much. Bye. It was great to have Adrian as our first interview. It was a real pleasure to have him on. So thanks again, Adrian.
Yeah, it was really, really interesting interview. Really, really good.
Yeah,
really
he's a good guest to have on. Steve's going to have a lot to live up to when he comes on next month.
Yeah, no pressure, Steve.
No pressure. Right. Well, I guess we better say hello to any of our new listeners who have seen us in the BBC Wildlife magazine. So hello, and also hello to our, now I suppose we call our regular listeners now, can't we?
Yeah.
Those of you that have been here from the beginning, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you for sticking with us.
Yes.
But
hope new and old will come back again.
Yes, but big hello and big welcome to everybody, and thanks for listening. And if anyone's got any questions, if this is the first time that you've actually listened to us, we do really want you to send in your UK wildlife questions, and you can actually do that via our Twitter and our Facebook pages. So if you just search for UK Wildlife Podcast, it will come up on Facebook and Twitter. If you're going to ask us a question through Twitter, if we can just ask you to use the hashtag UK Wildlife Podcast, it makes it easier to find the questions. But do send them in, and then we try our very best to answer them in the next episode.
And if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, thanks everyone that's given us positive reviews. If you like it, please consider giving us a good review. If you don't like it, don't bother reviewing us. But no, seriously, reviews are welcome. And we say questions, but if you want to send us stuff, we can give you a shout out. And if you've got some sort of wildlife related news or something you want us to talk about, just give us a shout.
Or really cool sighting. If you've had a really good sighting, please send them in. Let us know what you're seeing around the country as well, because I'm based in Somerset. Neil's based on the other side of the country.
Yeah, Essex. Doesn't like to say it.
So
like associate people from Essex.
So we're kind of we're seeing stuff in Somerset and Essex, but we'd love to know, certainly at this time of year, what are you seeing? What's starting to emerge? Send us in your sightings as well, because it'd be great to get a pattern of what's going on across the UK.
That'd be really good. Our next episode, I believe we're doing our photography one next, aren't we?
Yes. So we've got one that's dedicated to wildlife photography, as both Neil and I do. And we've got quite a few interesting things to cover in that. But if you've got any questions, whether it's technical or otherwise, again, send them in and we'll get them covered. If we could ask you to send any questions in by the end of January, that would be fantastic. Then we can get them together and just gives us time to put them together.
Yeah.
And hopefully we can get a couple of guests on. We need to get that sorted.
Yeah, we're plans are in motion. I'm lined up a few guests. That should be quite good. Right, I guess it's just time to do the standard end of podcast stuff. So you can follow us on Twitter at UK Wildlife Pod, and Facebook. If you search for UK Wildlife Podcast, you can find us there. My website, personal website, is www.uk-wildlife.co.uk. And Victoria?
And mine is www.vixpics.com. That's VIKSPICS, and you can kind of find out all what I'm up to on there as well.
And you can find our Twitter and Facebooks and stuff through them too. And I think that's it. So thank you very much for tuning in.
Don't forget to
And
get involved in the Big Garden Birdwatch
yes,
this weekend. It's an hour of your time, and those reports are, you know, absolutely invaluable to finding out what's going on with our garden birds. So get involved. Sit there and watch the birds in your garden with a cup of tea and a biscuit for an hour.
And grab the kid or grandkid, as we spoke to in Adrian in the interview. Yes. So
Yes.
well, enjoy the rest of February, everyone. Oh, February? It's only
January.
January.
We're
I
not
tried
even
again.
home
Right.
to February yet.
Oh, I might edit out. Might live in. So enjoy the rest of January, and we'll see you next month.
Yeah, we'll see you in February. Take care.
Bye bye.
Bye.